Welcome to A Closer Look. My guest this hour is Darrell Duncan, who's a Kingsport City Alderman, and Charles Nitschke, who is chair of the U.S. Census Committee in our region. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us be here.
So let's start with you, Darrell. Tell us a little bit about the history of the census, if you will.
Well, of course, the census really goes back to biblical times, but here in the United States, there's some very familiar names that's tied back with the census. One is George Washington. And so George Washington in 1790 said that he would like to have a census for the United States and see how many people actually lived in the United States. Another familiar name that was tied with that was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson at the time was the Secretary of State. And so George Washington asked Thomas Jefferson to conduct the census. And so from there, the people that was thought to be able to do the census the best was U.S. Marshals. So they hired an additional 460 U.S. Marshals. And the thing about a U.S. Marshal is they were used to the rugged territory. They were used to kind of tracking down a number of people. And so it seemed more logical that they would do the census. So it took a little bit over a year to do the first census, and when they got the results back a year later, the United States had around 3.9 million people in 1790.
Oh, wow.
George Washington didn't like that number. He thought that we had more people than that. And so he said it made us look very vulnerable to the British at the time. And so he thought that there was probably more. This census included it was very simple, but it didn't include any Indians or about 700,000 slaves that actually occupied the United States at the time.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew that. That's great. I love it when we have a little history that attaches to everything and why we do what we do.
Well, during the course of this, being on the census team is really just kind of doing some investigating and just kind of digging into it because I like history just in nature, so I found that as being very interesting myself.
Well, thanks for teaching us that. I really appreciate it. So, Charles, tell us what's going on with the census. It was supposed to expire the end of July, from what I understand, but I guess the pandemic has changed things a little bit.
That's correct, Linda. Excuse me. It was extended to October 31st because of the pandemic, but now, just today, they've moved it back. It's going to end as of September the 30th. So it's been a year-long process. Our committee, Darrell mentioned being on the committee, we have about 20 local citizens who have been very active with the committee for a year now, just trying to get the word out on the census itself.
Well, that's great. I'm glad it's extended, mostly because we need our numbers to improve with as far as how many people have actually answered the census. Let's talk about that a little bit. So it's really important that everybody fills out their census sheet or goes online and fills that out because you tell us why.
Well, it really boils down to the amount of money coming back into our community from the federal government. All of our taxes we pay, we send them to Washington, and then Washington determines how much money we're going to get back. And you can see on the screen where the money is spent in our state of Tennessee. $17.3 billion a year, and that's a ton of money. But just looking down the list, a lot of it goes for support of local citizens, like Medicaid, especially in education, medical supplies, highway construction is a big item, low-income housing loans, and Pell Grants, all the way down to special education grants. These are the top 10 that we just put together, and you can see the top 10 out of that $17.3 billion amounts to $14.3 billion, so that's 83% of where the money is spent. And what's really kind of puzzling to people like Darrell and me and the rest of our committee is the lack of interest from the citizens in completing the census, because if you look at what's on the screen now, last census in 2010, we had 82.9% response rate. And that meant in Sullivan County, over 26,000 people did not respond to the census. And each one of those persons, individuals, was worth over $1,000 a year. So if you take that 26,000 and put it together with $1,000, that means that Sullivan County lost over the last 10 years a total of $290 million that could have been spent on all of these programs.
That's huge. That's huge.
And just right now, I'll mention quickly, we're only at about 66% performance rate, and it's measured all the time by the Census Committee, and we're trying to get that response rate up above what it was in 2010 at least. So now we only have 2 more months to achieve that, and that's why we're working so hard to get those citizens who have not yet responded to take the time. As you said, Darrell said, it only takes about 7 minutes to respond, and it's easy to do so online.
I'm going to tell you, it takes less, really. It's so simple, whether 7 questions or something, and they're not invasive. And I have a feeling that a lot of people are nervous to do this because they think the government is trying to get invasive or find out personal information, because we're all kind of worried about that sort of thing these days because we hear about Big Brother and that sort of stuff. But it's not at all. It's just about getting funding here. And the questions are like, how many live in your household? Do you take care of somebody? How long have you lived here? Did you just move here? It's very simple questions just to make sure you are living within that region that is trying to get funding, right?
It is. To me, the questions are very non-intrusive at all. It's just what you said. It's how many people live in your household. It's your age, sex, race.
That's right.
So they're very, very simple, non-intrusive questions to most people. To kind of get back to what Charlie said about the over $1,000, it's almost $1,100. But people ask me, what they can do to their community. And so in just 3 to 4 minutes, you can fill out this sheet. And if it's a family of 3, and it's $1,100 per person over a 10-year period, that is $33,000 that you've given back to your community. That is just very, very easy to give back.
That is so simple. So what is the easiest way for people to answer their census right now? What if they don't have a computer? I mean, it seems like everybody does, or a smartphone, but there's actually people that just don't have internet or can't afford it right now. So what are the easiest ways for someone to respond to the census right now?
Go ahead.
Well, the easiest way, and Charlie can comment on this as well, but you can call, and it's like you said, if you don't have a computer or anything, then there's other ways as too. It was each household had a mailing. You can certainly send that back in. But we've got ground people that's getting ready to hit the ground. And so this will be through, they just changed this date, and it was going to go through October. It'll go through September the 31st. And they can certainly will assist you on filling this out and making sure it gets turned in. Charlie can comment on some other locations that we're doing as well.
What is the website, Charlie, first of all?
It's simple. It's 2020census.gov, just 2020census.gov.
That's easy enough.
And when you go to that screen, the first screen you see is a little block up there in the right-hand corner. It says respond, and you click on that, and it asks you for your census number you got when you receive the census form in the mail. But you don't need that. If you say, I can't find mine, then all you have to do is click another button, and it'll ask you for some basic information about yourself, and you can begin the census survey. But the important thing Darrell mentioned is people on the street. The census takers that we're so familiar with are going to start next week, August the 10th, going out and visiting folks who have not yet responded. Plus, the U.S. Census Bureau is setting up kiosks. There's going to be a couple in City Hall where people can just walk in and say, I want to take the census. So they need to pay particular attention to when that's going to be.
Well, that sounds like an easy way to do it. I mean, if you're not home, you work all day, and you're afraid people aren't going to be able to make it to your house because you're not going to be there, just go to City Hall, right? Am I understanding this correctly? Go to City Hall, and there'll be kiosks set up, and you can just do it right there.
Either City Hall or at the library.
Okay.
All the libraries in Sullivan County will have these kiosks where you can walk in and just take the census.
Also during this time, we have had remote setups. We've been at the farmer's market a number of times. We went to V.O. Dobbins and to try to initiate some interest and sign people up there as well. So there's a lot of different ways and different avenues that you can certainly sign up for the census.
Have you guys thought about doing things like going to Walmart, where everybody seems to go in town? I mean, just those kinds of things might be helpful too. I mean, hey, it works for Girl Scout cookies,
That's true.
But
that's a very good suggestion.
Well, good. I'm glad it's helpful. Okay, so again, people can go to 2020census.gov. There's going to be people on the ground coming up pretty soon, starting the 10th, correct? And if people don't get nervous if someone comes to your door asking you these questions, they're legit. Yeah. They're good people. And so those are good advice for you to get.
They'll also be identified. They'll have the proper identification through the Census Bureau to be able to recognize them too.
Okay, very good. I really appreciate you guys being here today. This is fantastic information. Is there any last little tidbits we need to know?
The last little tidbit, I think we would encourage people to just ask the question, what's in it for me? And if they think about all this money flowing back to support schools, to support roads, to support Medicaid, Medicare, it's an easy answer to their question.
Okay, very good. So again, you're going to be setting up kiosks. People are going to be hitting the ground, running, trying to get the last people we can so we can get more funding. The more people that answer these questions, the more funding we get for our region. And that means we get better programs and help that we need to make our region the best we can make it. So don't be afraid someone comes to your door. Or go to 2020census.gov. Answer your census questions and let's get money for our region. Thank you guys so much for being here today, and good luck.
Thank you for allowing us to be here today.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for
You're
the
welcome.
opportunity.
And we'll be back with another edition of A Closer Look.